once again to the Equip podcast, where we believe the Christian should be the most well read, the most well informed person in the room. And as we continue in this series on how we got here, one thing I like about it, I mentioned how it gives me a lot of peace knowing what's going on and how we got here, how to fix it, but also the Bible has proven itself over and over, I believe, through this series, that it is a supernatural book and it's written by an omniscient God. I'll quote one preacher who says, the Bible doesn't just tell us what happened, it tells us what always happens. And we're in the predicament we're in because of we got ourselves here. And the Bible tells us plainly, you turn your back on me, you turn your back on biblical principles, there's going to be ramifications for that. And of course, we're in this strange place just recently. Actually, in the last couple episodes, we talked about that. But the whole series, we've tried to assess again how we got here. It's interesting, the president is doing right now what he can to reduce the crime in our nation's capital and to reduce crime, and he wants to arrest criminals. He wants to make the streets safe. And there's many, many people fighting him and that are against that. So again, strange place. We're in a very, very weird situation right now. Well, in Ezekiel, actually a lot of the book of Ezekiel, but what I'm going to look at is chapter 22. We see God explaining why Israel was in the predicament they were in. And they were in exile and they were in bondage in Babylon. Now the priests, which, by the way, don't think of a priest like a Catholic priest of today, but the priests were the spiritual leaders. They took care of the sacred. And what Ezekiel is telling them, what God is telling him through Ezekiel, is one of the problems you have put no difference between, I'll get the words right here, the holy and the profane. No difference between the clean and the unclean. We might say it today between the sacred and I guess we could say the secular. That's usually the words we would use to describe that. And really, we see that actually many places in the Bible. I think of Adam and Eve. Okay, Adam and Eve, all this is yours. Yours, mine. This one tree, mine. This is sacred. It's all yours, mine. And see, they got that messed up. And boy, God takes this thing of the sacred. We see it in Ezekiel, and really throughout the Bible. We see it in the garden. He takes this serious. Now, sacred, that term means pertaining or connected to God, or religion, the way we would use it, religion. Now, it's an interesting thought. And again, how we got to this place, we started, in episode 1, we began to question the authenticity of the Bible. Can the Bible be relied upon? Is it true? The historicity of the Bible, or is it just myth? Once you begin to question that, and we've gone through the series, we've looked at various things, that's how we got to this place. But if the atheists are true, the skeptics are true, that their claim is there is no God. Well, what that means is there never was a God. And really, then I have some questions. I would love somebody to explain to me. No God ever, never, ever, ever was there a God. I would love somebody to explain the Bible. With just no, there never was a God. How do we have a Bible? Over and over again, these people in the Bible said, God came to me. God literally told John, book of Revelation, write what you see, write this down. Thus saith the Lord, thousands and thousands of times in the Bible, Old Testament especially, 3,800, I'm right around there. Thus saith the Lord. People were writing what God told them to write. I would love, if there never was a God, please explain the Jews to me. Here's this group of people throughout history said, we're God's chosen people. And to tell you the truth, in their history, a lot of times they didn't want to be God's people. Like, choose somebody else. Everything that we've got, we don't want to be God's people. Explain the Jews, this group of people where God would speak to them, God would rise up prophets, God raised up a Moses to lead these people. And they always claim from the very beginning, oh, yeah, we're God's chosen people. Explain the Jews if there never ever was a God. That's a tough one. Explain the 10 Commandments. These universal laws, we all believe them. And that's just a few. We could go on there. See, if there never was a God, or if there is no God, there never was a God. By the way, if there's no God, remember what sacred is, pertaining to God, having to do with religion. If there's no God, folks, nothing is sacred. There never was a God to say, that's special, that's sacred, that's holy, that's profane, and this is set apart for me. The atheist and the critics will explain that away. Oh, it's just all made up. All of it's made up. It's like Santa. Just the world made this up, God and the Bible and the Jews or whatever. And it's just like Santa. Well, there's a very big difference. And let me explain this. Universally, yes, Santa, and we know, is made up. But this is what happens with Santa. You grow older, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, sometimes even a little bit older, and then you realize you're sophisticated enough, finally, that brain to say, oh, there's no Santa. Something very different with God. Many, 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 I would say millions of people, they get older and more sophisticated and more well-read and understand things more, and they come to Christ. One I just read recently, a little bit of science will make you an atheist. A whole lot of science will make you a believer. And I love that statement. So it's not just like Santa. No. We get older and millions have come to Christ. Well, if there is no God and nothing is sacred, see, this was Nietzsche's issue. Nietzsche, of course, famous for saying God is dead. And it's an interesting poem, what he wrote when he said that God is dead and we've killed him. It's a very interesting, look that up. It's unbelievable. But see, Nietzsche was not like, hey, it's party time, there is no God. He really thought deep about this, like, wait a second. If there's no God, we exist, and that's it. There's no purpose, there's no meaning in life. We just exist. And actually, that took him to a very dark place. He spent, I believe, the last decade of his life in a psych ward. He went crazy. And you see the nihilism of today, nihilism, I've heard actually very intelligent people pronounce that both those ways. I'm not sure, but the nihilism we see today, nihilism is like, what's the use? There's no meaning, there's no purpose. And it leads many to a very dark place. Well, see, wait a second now. Let's think this through. Nothing is sacred. See, the abortion protesters, their argument, they proclaim, and some groups are even called the sanctity of life. Sanctity. You know what? Life is sacred. Actually, property is sacred. We made a big deal about that in our Constitution. The idea of private property is a major concept in free nations. But isn't it, and you know this, when you get something stolen from you, it's just like, oh, whatever. Something deep down happens. Like you feel violated. Somebody stole something from me. Well, you know why? It's sacred. It's one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not steal. See, what I'm trying to get to is there is a sacred. How did we get to the place we're in? We have a society where nothing is sacred. So much so, even when it comes to property, the most ungodly ideologies of the leftists and the Marxists and the liberals. See, isn't it interesting? And we talked about this when it came to the law. All of a sudden, property is no big deal. With Marx, let's take their property from them. The bourgeoisie, we're going to take their property. We had a president a while back tell a businessman, you don't own that. You didn't build that. See, it's that no, property is sacred. And of course, now we're seeing in some of these more leftist cities where stealing is okay. It's a misdemeanor. No, it's sacred. That's a big deal, a big deal. And God wanted us to remember that there's things that are sacred. When Israel was in the wilderness, see, they built this sacred place, a tabernacle. It's sacred. And then they would build a permanent, a temple, a sacred place where sacred observances by sacred people. The Lord's Supper is something sacred that we do in church. It's not just, oh, I get to eat and drink a little. No. Something special about that. The Sabbath, the sacredness of the Sabbath. And of course, we've shifted a little bit in the New Testament, but the concept is still there. And this is what we're supposed to do. We work 6 days, just like God did in creation. And then you know what you do? You rest one. What's that day for? To remember. Every week, you're supposed to remember God created. God worked for 6 days, just like I did. And then he rested one. We're supposed to look back every Sabbath day and remember what God did. And now we get to rest. And God gave that to us, by the way. It's interesting. The French Revolution, and what they really wanted to do is, this was a total anti-God, secular movement, atheistic movement. They wanted to totally get away from everything secular, which they had good reason. The Catholic Church was in charge, and they were as corrupt as could be in France. And so were the politicians, by the way. So they had a reason not to justify what they did. But you know what? One thing they were going to get away from? A 7-day week. They wanted to go to a 10-day week. They wanted that metric system, if you will. System International, they called it. And we're familiar with the metric system. It's all base 10. They were going to go to a 10-day week, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it physically. The animals couldn't do it. See, that 7-day week is interesting. There's only one explanation for that. Now, a year is the earth going around the sun. That's a year. A day, 24 hours wide. That's how long it takes the earth to spin. A month, lunar. 28 days of that lunar. 7 makes no sense whatsoever that we have a 7-day week. It doesn't divide into 365. It doesn't divide into 366. Why 7? It came from the Bible. Authority, justice, and truth, like we have talked about the last 2 episodes, used to be so sacred. When you're on trial and you become a witness, you put your hand on the Bible and swear to tell the truth. Why? Because this is sacred. We're going to determine right and wrong, who's guilty, who's innocent, and then there's going to be justice applied and punishment applied. That is a sacred thing. And now it's used for political purposes. It's used for political gain or personal gain or just to punish my enemies. I'm going to get them. It's sick. That's why it just inside of us. That's so wrong. Why? Because that's something sacred. I'm going to end with a C.S. Lewis quote. And it just reminds me of there's this sacredness to certain things. Because there is a God who determines, and some things are set apart for God. And when the atheists and the secularists have decided there's no God, that means there's nothing is sacred anymore. And you see it and sense it, and that's why it's so deep in us, the things that are going wrong. Man, that's sacred. No, there is no sacred. C.S. Lewis said this: if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Boy, is that true. This is not all there is. There's another world waiting for us that God is preparing for us. I hope that helped, and we will see you next time.